to everyone present in this lecture, and in particular to the organizers, the International Institute for Middle East and Balkan Studies. I want to express my gratitude to Mr. Bečirović and to Mr. Aliyev for having me as a guest speaker today. Earlier this morning, I had the opportunity to speak to some of the prominent members of the government and of the opposition in Lubjanë, including the leader of our sister party, Z.Basha, and the senior advisor to the President of the Republic of Slovenia, Professor Petrović, Ernest Petrović, who I thank from my heart for taking the time to be present here in this opportunity to exchange thoughts about not only the current situation in Albania, but also the overall situation in the Western Balkans, part of the neighborhood, the greater neighborhood of Slovenia. But before I do so, let me express my gratitude to Slovenia, to the Slovenian people, and Slovenian authorities, subsequent governments, regardless of political color, for the indispensable and steadfast support they have given to my country throughout this 29 years, and in particular in our path towards Euro-Atlantic and European integration. I stipulate the unreserved support and assistance of Slovenia during the crucial process of Albania's membership into NATO, which we celebrated just last week. It was the 10th anniversary of our membership, and also the membership of the Republic of Croatia, as we look towards finalizing also the path of the Republic of North Macedonia, path that we started all 3 out, but unfortunately was delayed for more than 10 years for Skopje. Also, to express my gratitude for the help that we have received in know-how, in technical support, but also in direct political support, unwavering support for our aspiration to become a member, a full-fledged member of the European Union. Support that has not wavered even in key milestones such as the process of visa liberalization for visa travel for Albanian citizens, which occurred in 2010. Ladies and gentlemen, my country and the region has made a quantum leap forward, not only compared to 10 years ago, but in particular compared to 29 years ago, as the Berlin Wall was crumbling and as unfortunately our region was plagued by the last war of the century, the wars of the dissolution of the former Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Ever since then, step by step, we have seen consolidation of peace and stability. We have seen standards being achieved in good governance, democratic practices, in neighborly cooperation. But as we face the last and determining phase of our aspiration to make the entire region part of the European Union, as the first generation of Albanians and other people from former communist countries of the Balkans, born in freedom, is coming of age, another threat is looming large. This threat does not have the shape of a superpower or of an ideology. It is a threat of autocracy fueled by collusion with organized crime and corruption, that is taking hostage weak democratic institutions, that is destroying or crippling elections as an instrument of accountability, that is impacting overall the main drive towards prosperity in Europe and in the West, which is competition. Competition in politics, competition in economy, competition as the only way to push forward and to manifest the best virtues, the best values, the added value for society. Let me give you a few facts on Albania, a few quick facts as far as our EU perspective is concerned. We applied for full EU membership in April 2009 during the then Czech presidency. We were confirmed as a candidate country in June 2014. Since 15 December 2010, Albanians, after fulfilling all technical criteria and political criteria, have been able to travel visa-free to the Schengen area, which includes most of the EU countries, as well as Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland. The Stabilization and Association Agreement was also concluded back in June 2006. However, negotiations have taken so far 3 times longer than they took in the case of Croatia or Macedonia. EU integration, of course, has become the most important part of the social contract that our political systems have established with its citizens in the post-communist period. 80% of Albanian public, according to the 2018 Balkan Public Barometer, support the EU integration process. Other studies put it as high up as 94%. The new strategy for the Western Balkans, which was adopted in February 2018 by the European Commission, has set out the consolidated, I wouldn't call them new, but consolidated flagship initiatives and support for our region. In order to meet EU membership criteria and in the interest of our own societies, Western Balkans need to implement comprehensive reforms in crucial areas, starting with the rule of law, fundamental rights and liberties, and good governance must be strengthened significantly. Judicial reforms, the fight against corruption and organized crime, the public administration reform need to deliver real results, need to be implemented. And the functioning of democratic institutions need to be seriously enhanced. Economic reforms have to be pursued so that structural weaknesses, low competitiveness, and high unemployment rates are addressed. These are the objectives that have been set out, and all countries must unequivocally commit in both political will and in implementation to overcome the legacy of the past by achieving reconciliation and solving open issues, in particular border disputes, well before accession to the European Union. There needs to be a comprehensive, legally binding normalization agreement between Serbia and Kosovo, so that they can also advance on their respective European paths to both become members of the European Union. As regards my country, 29 years after the fall of communism and 17 years after the start of the process on January 31st, 2003, when Commission President Prodi officially launched the negotiations for the Stabilization and Association Agreement. This process is still ongoing. The EU Enlargement Progress Report on Albania, both last year and this year, raised concerns on corruption, state capture, and the low conviction rate for high-ranking officials, in other words, for continuous impunity. This report urged Albania to do more to tackle corruption and organized crime, especially crime related to immigration and human trafficking and drugs, after the Commission recommended last April to open negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia. There seems to be a discrepancy between the EC Progress Report, the European Commission's Progress Report, and the situation on the ground. The tendency to focus entirely on EU accession criteria and conditions has created a narrow-minded view on Albania's challenges. Brussels has often chosen to focus on the technical process of law harmonization for the sake of stability to the cost of democracy, which has been misused by autocratic leaders in the Balkans who are now endangering the very stability they promised to deliver in exchange for being tolerated for small transgressions of democracy and rule of law, because these small transgressions inevitably have led to bigger transgressions, such as in the case of my country, the complete elimination of constitutional court for more than 1 year, as well as corrupt practices with regard to parliamentary elections. So in its entirety, stability is being endangered because of corruption, collusion with organized crime, and state capture, as both EU and State Department reports have laid out. The judicial reform, a key reform put forward with EU backing, has so far delivered little or no results, considering the impunity of politicians and organized crime bosses. We are, as I mentioned previously, to the best of my knowledge, the only country whose constitutional court has been defunct for 1 year and whose Supreme Court has effectively also stopped working for more than 1 year. This discrepancy is further revealed by reports from other European and international agencies, while reports from international organizations such as Transparency International, Freedom House, US State Department point out the deep problems of crime, drugs, and state capture. There are public statements from Brussels that overlook these problems altogether. So we have come to a point where democracy has been sacrificed to maintain stability, and now we are lacking both. This must be a lesson for the future. The lack of democracy and rule of law leads to the lack of stability. In other words, there can be no stability while there is state capture by corruption or organized crime. I would like to use this opportunity to highlight the need for a more objective and intrusive look into the situation of rule of law in Albania and in the entire region, taking precedence from a positive development, which gives me hope that there is now a reflection also in the European Commission for the need for a more objective and realistic approach. I'm talking about the Priebe reports. The European Union has recently noted the elements of state capture in the entire region of the Western Balkans. The term state capture implies a state of widespread corruption in which the government and public institutions are used both through legal and illegal channels to pump out public resources for private gain, for the gain of private interests, and often also for the gain of interests connected to organized crime. Thus, the European Union has recognized the need for more effective monitoring regarding rule of law reforms in the countries that seek membership. This can be achieved by relying on positive example of so-called Priebe report, which already helped to address and partially overcome a serious crisis of democracy and rule of law in 2015 in Northern Macedonia. Instead of waiting for the new crisis to escalate, it is my call that this practice, this new reporting tool, be used proactively throughout the region to contribute to a more comprehensive, realistic, clear, and public understanding of the most burning problems faced by democratic institutions and the rule of law in all Western Balkan countries. It is positive to note in this context, the European Commission has just launched this new Priebe report initiative to monitor the whole rule of law system in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Priebe's report and its recommendations will be presented and discussed in the context of Justice, Freedom and Security Subcommittee of the Stabilization and Association Agreement at the end of 2019. I would like to use this opportunity from this well-established headquarters of IFIMES in Slovenia to encourage the EU institutions to initiate such a monitoring mission in Albania as well. The Priebe report can serve as a model for a new reporting mechanism that goes beyond technical monitoring of alignment with acquis of the EU. An independent expert report supported by the European Commission can be an adequate response and an effective pressure to resolve problems before they explode into full-blown crisis or close the circle of state capture. I will now briefly address the issue of regional cooperation, stating some of the main facts which need to be taken into account when we look at the challenges to be resolved. The total population of the countries still not included in the European Union from the Western Balkans is about 20 million. The combined GDP about 80 billion euros. The region lies in the heart of Europe. It's practically now an island encircled by members of the European Union. However, weak economic and rule of law performance has left all of the countries in the region lagging behind EU indicators in terms of prosperity and living standards. In other words, the gap between prosperity and opportunity in countries members of the European Union, started with Slovenia, and countries of the Western Balkans, instead of narrowing, has continued to widen. GDP per capita in the Western Balkans is on average just 1/4, 25% of the level of the richest EU members in Western Europe, and only 50% of the average of the EU 11 new member countries. Although encouraging progress has been made in the past 2 decades, some of the transformation is not only undeniable but breathtaking. Advances towards eventual EU membership and these trends are likely to continue boosting growth and investment. Challenges still remain. Economic activity has been enhanced by regional cooperation, which is one of the greatest achievements of the past 2 decades, bringing 2 key benefits. First, reducing tensions and strengthening regional stability, allowing more attention to be focused on common economic challenges and increasing the attractiveness of the region as an investment destination. And secondly, bringing various practical benefits that stem from higher levels of intra-regional flows of people, goods, services, and capital, thus enhancing the elements of competitivity of relatively small and otherwise non-competitive economies. Recent examples of this growing regional cooperation include the EBRD Balkan Summit in 2014, the efforts to advance a few major priority connectivity projects in transport and energy culminating in the agreement of April 2015 by the meeting of Prime Ministers in Brussels, of the Western Balkans, Prime Ministers in Brussels, and increasing focus on soft connectivity on the new era of IT and 5G generation. The Western Balkans 6 process received the strongest political boost in the summit in Berlin in 2014, which paved the way for the Berlin process, stimulating and calling for the creation of the single investment space, which includes harmonizing legislation, removing non-tariff barriers, improving both the depth and the horizontal links of capital markets, strengthening the business environment in the region, and facilitating FDI, foreign direct investment. Bilateral relations in the region have also advanced. The strengthened coordination between the West Balkan 6 and the key international stakeholders has been accompanied by progress and reconciliation and strengthening of good neighborly relations in the region. Highlights include, among others, the EU facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina aimed at normalization of the relations between the Republic of Serbia and the Republic of Kosovo. Here I would like to make a very clear point as far as my position and the position of the Democratic Party is concerned. We stand strongly for no territorial swaps in Kosovo. The normalization agreement between Kosovo and Serbia is vital to stability and the EU perspective of our region, but a territorial swap should not take place. Any change of borders by swapping ethnic territories is a very dangerous precedent. Societies in the Balkans are multi-ethnic, and multi-ethnicity should be considered added value and not an obstacle. The idea of pure ethnic states is inherently dangerous to peace and stability. A positive note on bilateral relations is without doubt the PRESPA agreement. This is a historic moment which shows how the region can move forward. This agreement is an investment in the future of all citizens of North Macedonia, including Albanians, by strengthening good neighborly relations. However, the EU and the member states must not and cannot overlook the strategic importance of the Western Balkan region. Geographically, Western Balkans form a land bridge and the shortest transit route between the southeast flank of the EU and its central European core. The importance of this transit route was clearly demonstrated in the 2015-2016 refugee crisis. As far as economic cooperation and EU integration is concerned, I would like to emphasize that convergence towards EU living standards requires a major and sustained boost to productivity and investments. The prospect of eventual EU accession remains a key anchor for reforms. It is clear that countries in the Western Balkans fall short of being considered well-functioning, sustainable market economies. Just to tell you how large the gaps are, over 50% of youth population is unemployed in our countries, with one country reporting the youth unemployment rate of 63%, Europe's highest. Women participation in active labor market starts at a very poor and disappointing 30%. So far, governments in the Western Balkans have failed to find a sustainable solution that develops human capital and keeps it within the region, mobilizes youth entrepreneurship, and supports small and medium enterprises for both the traditional and the new economy. The Western Balkan economy relies on a few sectors. 4 sectors stand out as being of particular importance, in particular domestic trade, industry, public administration, and agriculture. Public administration is the 3rd largest economic sector. The sector includes defense, education, social service, and other public administration, and accounts for 17% of economic activity. This ranges from 13% in Albania to over 1/5 of the economy in Bosnia and Hercegovina. In general, the region remains agriculture intensive. 12% of value added on average, ranging from 7% in Bosnia and Herzegovina to 23% in Albania. Agriculture plays a vital role, both socially and in terms of employment. Small and medium enterprises dominate our economies. According to a recent OECD-led study, small and medium enterprises make up 99% of businesses in all countries of Western Balkans. On average, they provide jobs for around 3/4 of the total number of employed, with Albania topping with 80% of employment provided by small and medium enterprises. The EU remains by far the biggest trading partner. 2/3 of the region's exports are with the EU. The share ranges from 80% in North Macedonia to just 23% in Kosovo. On average, 20% of Western Balkans exports go to neighboring countries, figure ranging from a 46% share in Kosovo to a mere 9% in Albania. All countries in the Western Balkans have suffered from severe regional disparities, high levels of unemployment, especially among the youth, regular and growing trends of emigration, and low level of labor force participation. Aging populations now pose a growing challenge to long-term growth and sustainability of social security systems, with some of them near collapse, such as the case in my country. Not surprisingly, a large proportion of the Western Balkan population has emigrated to more developed countries, in particular Western and Northern Europe, as a result of the violent conflicts of the 90s, lower income per capita, and chronic high unemployment, especially of young people. In 2015, according to UN data, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Albania had the largest shares of their nationals living permanently abroad, respectively at 46.7% in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina and 38.4% in the case of Albania. If these issues are not robustly addressed, human capital challenges will severely limit the prospects for growth and poverty reduction. That is why investing in early childhood development would help improve performance in primary and secondary education and empower students with the skills employers need. In this framework, dual vocational training, which seems to be the most successful practice in the biggest growing economy of Europe, the German economy, must be an example for our countries. It is clearly an example that my party and I are looking at as a top priority when it comes to education reform and youth employment reform. Better targeted social assistance programs will also help protect the poor and vulnerable households from shocks. I would also like to touch briefly on digital transformation, having been a first-hand witness of the benefits that this has brought already at an early stage in my country as Interior Minister, when a digital overhaul of the civil registry, of biometric passports and IDs for our citizens, and of digitalization of migration and border controls led to the process of visa liberalization and freedom of movement in the Schengen area for our citizens. Whereas complete digitalization of the registration of businesses has led to unprecedented levels of transparency, both in terms of business registrations, but also in terms of public procurement. I stipulated, I'm talking about 10 years ago. Meanwhile, some of these standards have receded, so digital transformation is not a recipe that can solve bad governance practices or corrupt practices, but it's definitely a practice with which better governance is made easily possible. In this regards, digital transformation offers opportunities for innovation and introduction of new products for the global consumers, inclusion in education and workplace, and enables new ways of interacting, working, and learning. A profound change in the teaching methods and daily practices of educational organizations is required. Governments need to partner in promoting peer learning and the exchange of good practices, fostering a strong entrepreneurial mindset. The Western Balkan region is lagging behind in creating the building blocks and infrastructure for a successful digital economy. The greatest obstacle to the digital efforts in the region is lack of cooperation and fragmented relationships between and within the Western Balkan countries. Financing the digitalization efforts is a true regional challenge and one clearly best undertaken as a joint consideration with sizable support extended by EU funds, instruments, and the toolbox currently available to EU member countries. This transformation should aim to mobilize innovation and entrepreneurship for the digital economy, but also deliver more transparent, stronger, and accountable governance and public institutions trusted by the public. Today, there are startups in the region. I had the privilege to visit startups here in Slovenia just 4 or 5 years ago. Very impressed. I'm sure it has been completely transformed since I was there. There are interesting products, innovative technologies, and promising teams led by founders, mostly young, with ambitious mindsets. There are, however, only few established intermediaries, investors, incubators, and accelerators. Again, I refer to the incubator I visited in Lubjanë. I don't know whether it's still the only one, whether you have more, but it definitely was inspiring itself. The Western Balkan region consequently features very few regional success stories of companies that have successfully grown and scaled up to offer their products to a wider base of consumers, clients, and beneficiaries, although innovators from the Western Balkans, including my country Albania, have made huge steps in Western markets, from Italy to Germany to Scandinavian countries to the United States. The governments of the region currently lack the capacity and know-how to support the regional startups' ambitions and potential. While the governments in the region do offer early-stage grants and limited funding, they are insufficient on their own. Funding opportunities for startups in the Western Balkan region are limited and in many areas non-existent. In this case, I would like to advocate and stipulate my support for state actions, government actions to be expanded to include long-term development programs and funding for cross-border ecosystems in all countries of the Western Balkan region to promote entrepreneurship, change the attitudes and the public perception of entrepreneurship. Successful proliferation of innovative startups, small, medium enterprises, and small enterprises will help move the region toward the digital frontier, change the perceptions of the general population, bring the people together, change the perceptions with their dissatisfaction with the local social systems, contribute to mitigating the trend of exodus of talent and skills from the Western Balkans region, and keeping, in particular, youth and talented youth at home. Finally, on EU standards versus Western Balkans standards or Western Balkans practices, which I hope will leave space for Western Balkan standards. Western Balkans countries lag behind EU standards, whether in terms of overall competitivity, weak institutions, low standards of governance, or barriers, hidden or open, to trading across borders, to take some of the most commonly cited problems. For example, the main obstacles in Albania, according to an OECD survey among companies, are competition from the informal sector, high cost of electricity and of fuel, access to finance despite the high number of banks, competition among lenders appears to be limited, complex procedures, collateral requirements, unsurmountable collateral requirements, and the size of loans that make small and medium enterprises in particular struggle to get the funds they need to grow their businesses. And tax administration, with Albania topping the charts with the highest taxes in the region. Unfair competition from the informal sector stand out as the most serious threat perceived by the businesses in the region. In general, the business environment for small businesses is particularly difficult. Political connections and corruption in all levels of government are seen by people as obstacles and, in the case of political connections, as a sine qua non to success not only in business, but in life. A system of patronage, a government by people and not by laws. According to EBRD and World Bank Life in Transition Survey, an average of more than 1/3 of people in the Western Balkans rate political connections as more important than their effort and hard work, intelligence and skills as a key to success in life, Albania being in the top 3. In this regard, the Western Balkans stand out among all EBRD sub-regions, highlighting the absence of meritocratic job selection and prevalence of clientelism and vested interests. Systemic corruption is a persistent problem. The latest progress reports assess each of the Western Balkan 6 countries' fight against corruption as being at some level of preparation, unquote, second lowest point. The private sector also sees corruption as a major obstacle. The cost of corruption measured by cent of annual revenue paid as informal payment to get things done are estimated at almost 1% of annual sales. This is at least the measured bill of corruption. Of course, the damage caused goes beyond the mathematical measurements of corruption. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of this points to the acute need for a sustainable transformation, in particular as far as democratic practices, rule of law, and sharing European values of check and balance and separation of powers in all of the Western Balkans. In particular, as far as Albania is concerned, where the country is currently undergoing a deep constitutional and political crisis, this means also that we are in front of possibly a big opportunity, not simply for a quick fix that would pave the way to another crisis, but for a transformational overhaul of the practices that so far have failed to deliver sustainable democratic functioning parliament, rule of law with equal justice for all, and a competitive free market economy that is open and inclusive and not exclusive and controlled by government firms. These are the challenges that my country is facing, together with the primary challenge of state capture by organized crime interests. This is the battle that we are fighting. And before I go into more detail on the outlook for the coming weeks, months, and years, for which I remain an uncured optimist for Albania, but also for the rest of the Western Balkan countries, let me stop here with my presentation, hoping that my ambition to cover all the aspects, economic, political, and the rule of law, has not overburdened your patience and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Z.Basha. As we know, we do not support Vučić's initiative of the changing of territories or the destruction of borders.
No, I don't. No, I never have. And neither has any of the parties belonging to the opposition. We believe this is an inherently dangerous idea. This is throwing the region back to the times when borders were important and ethnic composition of states were important and countries were fighting, not only politically but with armies, soldiers and tanks, and deploying dreadful atrocities, including ethnic cleansing, in order to create ethnic states. In fact, I believe the whole idea is quintessentially anti-European. It endangers European vision and European interests in the region. The whole idea of Europe and the European Union is to render the borders insignificant in order to allow for a free flow of capital, people, goods, ideas, free exchange, especially amongst youth, also of know-how and skills. So returning to redrawing of borders paradigms is returning to Milosevician concepts about the region. I believe that this is not only a wrong way, but a dangerous way for peace and stability. It certainly rings alarm bells for the stability of other countries that have similar situations as those that have led to calls for change of borders and exchange of territories regarding Kosovo and Serbia. So I am strongly opposed to it. This is a view that I have made public, but also that I've shared with many interlocutors, including the highest authorities of your country, of Slovenia. I am encouraged to see that the past few weeks have seen a decisive and vocal stance against this idea, also from meaningful and significant factors in the European scene, the Euro-Atlantic scene. And I hope that the sooner this idea, I believe the sooner this idea is buried, the sooner we can return to the constructiveness of dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade, and to move forward with the targets and the goals that have been set for this dialogue without losing more time with this anachronic backthrow to dangerous ideas, not simply for these two countries, but for peace and stability in the region.
In recent years, Edi Rama extends the thesis and at the same time the threat of so-called Big Albania, Shqipëri e Madhe. What is your opinion on all these big state projects in Egypt? Albania, Serbia, and Croatia, and other people?
It gives me a chance to go back to what I was saying. A project for resolving the Albanian problem in the Balkans has been unfolded and has progressed quite well in the past 10 years. When asked about this almost 10 years ago by a colleague institute of yours, CSIS in Washington, whether we had a design for a greater Albania, I said, yes, we do. And we even have a flag for a greater Albania. It's a blue flag with 12 golden stars. We have formulated a response to a historical problem of the Albanian problem in the Balkans. And that is European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Albania, of Kosovo, of North Macedonia, of Montenegro, and the European integration, European membership of Serbia, which means, in effect, once completed, European standards in terms of protecting fundamental human rights and liberties where Albanians form minorities, such as in southern Serbia or in Montenegro, and guaranteeing the respective rights of the state-forming Albanian community in North Macedonia, and guaranteeing standards of living for Albanians wherever they live, Republic of Albania, Republic of Kosovo, and everywhere else. So, ending century-long calvar of Albanians who have experienced during the past century programs of ethnic cleansing and discrimination cannot and should not come through a new project of ethnic reunification. But the only way forward is that of uniting all countries where Albanians live in different proportions, from Albania and Kosovo to North Macedonia, Southern Serbia, Montenegro, and so on, as members of the European Union. That is the only design to move forward. As far as speculations from certain politicians are concerned, I can guarantee you the ones who raise their voices higher are the ones who least worry about achieving these fundamental rights or protecting these fundamental rights of their own citizens, be them Albanians or Serbs or from whichever nationality. They are simply doing what corrupt autocrats have always done. They seek refuge in nationalist rhetoric, in patriotic flaring up, to escape from, or to try to escape from their failures at home, and to tap into patriotic or nationalist feeling as a way of moving away attention from failing economies, failing public policies, or the complete lack of public policies, failing health systems, backward education systems, failing to attract FDI. What do you do when you fail in all areas and you want to hold on to power? You take out again the flavor of nationalism, fake nationalism, because it leads to nowhere. It's interesting that this is done very often in collusion with each other. So you see corrupt autocrats pretending to fight over national pride, preferably in each other's capitals, only to see them dining together and to exchange best practices of patronage, state capture, and corruption far from the public eye. So no, I do not believe anyone is serious about this. This is an escape route for corrupt autocrats, and the best remedy against it is to strengthen democracy, to strengthen rule of law, and prevent impunity of corrupt politicians.
Prime Minister Edi Rama has launched an initiative to set up a monument to the expelled Albanians from Greek Chamari region. Prime Minister Tsipras has raised the issue of the situations of the Greek community, in particular in the south of Albania. What is going on with this matter?
You know, again, in Western Balkan, nothing new from the Western Balkans. It's the same game, cat and mouse. Fulfilling obligations that arise from membership in the Council of Europe, from adherence to PCHR and its mandatory human rights protocols, and all other documents that bind governments to respect fundamental human rights of all its citizens, regardless of their religion or ethnic background. This is something that we must keep our eye on. And definitely a lot needs to be done in this regard in each of our countries to improve the record of respecting human rights and freedoms. In this regard, what we have faced in Albania over the past few years has been an increase in assault of fundamental human rights and freedoms, including those of life, health, and property. The problem has been compounded by the lack of constitutional court and the virtual lack of Supreme Court. Let me remind you that currently, as we speak, there are 40,000 cases pending before the Supreme Court of Albania, equal to the number of cases pending before the Supreme Court of the United States of Mexico. 2.8 million inhabitants compared to hundreds of millions of inhabitants. And 1/3 of those cases are individual cases against the government. The lack of constitutional court and the lack of Supreme Court has had devastating effects on our rule of law, destroying checks and balances on, especially the checks on the actions of the executive and the legislative. That is why one of the most urgent needs to address the constitutional crisis in Albania as part of the deep political crisis is to immediately act to have a functioning constitutional court and a functioning Supreme Court. As far as relations with Greece are concerned, some believe that Greece is a very important strategic partner of Albania, and I am committed to undertake all actions necessary to improve relations with so far the only EU member with whom we share a terrestrial border, the other one being Italy across the Adriatic.
How do you see the events in Northern Macedonia after the arrival of Zoran Zaev to the head of the government of that country?
Well, I believe the Prespa agreement is a good thing for the region. It is one stroke of good news in a streak of not so good news. It shows that with open-mindedness and perseverance, even intricate problems such as the one that held Skopje hostage 10 years ago and prevented it from joining NATO back then can be overcome. It also shows that good faith cooperation between political parties, in this case Macedonian political parties and Albanian political parties in North Macedonia, can lead to productive solutions that pave the way to stability and to focus more energy and positive energy on how challenges to be overcome. Having said that, the challenges of rule of law and of functioning democracy are challenges that our eastern neighbor shares with the rest of the region, each one to a certain degree. I'm not in a position to lecture, given the latest State Department report on the situation of state capture in my country, and the situation of the fight against crime, corruption, and money laundering. But I would like to stipulate that a key indicator for North Macedonia's further progress remains a good track record in full implementation of the obligations arising from the Ohrid Agreement.
Why are the Albanians more in favor of the United States than of the European itself?
I know that this perception is well understood beyond the Albanian neighborhood. You have to understand there's an historical context to that, which goes back to 1914. I'm not sure if we want to start to talk about 1914 in 2019. It was President Wilson's strong stance that saved Albania from remaining a country. And there was again very strong and clear-sighted support by subsequent U.S. presidents, from George Herbert W. Bush to President Clinton to George W. Bush to President Obama, that made our nation overcome some existential thresholds, such as Albania's membership into NATO, such as Kosovo's situation, first stopping and reversing the ethnic cleansing, and then leading to the process of Kosovo's independence, where all that the United States have played to alongside the European Union and UK, Germany, Italy, France, and other countries to overcome the consequences of the conflict in 2001. So yes, there is a special relationship between Albanians, including the Republic of Albania and the United States, but that does not in any way prejudice our relation with the EU, and in particular with EU nations who have invested so much in peace, stability, and democratic standards for Albania and the Albanians wherever they live. I'd like to single out Germany, German taxpayers being the #1 contributors to Albania's 29-year transition from a Pol Pot-style isolated dictatorship to a NATO member aiming to become EU.
It is interesting that the Albanian Prime Minister has never been on a bilateral visit to Bosnia and Herzegovina so far. What do you think about the events in Bosnia and Herzegovina and about the possible consequence on the region?
I am very concerned about the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I am concerned by stagnation, which may lead to something worse. I am concerned by the border game between Kosovo and Serbia being the prelude of something between Bosnia and Serbia. And very much for the entire region. I am concerned by the lack of progress with institutional reforms and appetite for pulling towards more isolation within the three main communities: Bosnian community, the Slovenian Croatians, and the Republika Srpska. I believe that this is a situation where both the EU and the US must strongly and quickly act to put a strong and solid roof on 3 decades of investment before torrents of newfound nationalism destroy the walls that have been built with so much sacrifice and upon so much human suffering. So it is time to move forward. This requires bold moves from the leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it also requires a strategic political support from the European Union and from the United States instead of a technocratic calculus or the wooden values that has been used so far, not only in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in the case of other Muslim countries. And as far as I am concerned, in terms of bilateral relations, the potential of bilateral relations, in particular economic relations between Albania and Bosnia and Herzegovina, is entirely underutilized, and I'm committed to bring substantial change into that, in particular in areas of convergent synergies such as the sector of energy, hydropower energy, the sector of pharmaceuticals.
The practice is that all parties in our country wishing to become a member of the European Union unanimously support its European part. Is it a little bit different in Albania?
No, there's no difference. All political parties embrace EU membership as the ultimate goal. The Democratic Party of Albania was born on the call to make Albania a member of the European Union.
Your party is not a member of Albanian Parliament?
Yes, we were, until we have decided to take this move in order to
support EU process without parliament.
Supporting it with a real parliament. Look, what was happening in the country was a silent slip to the death of trias politica. Now, since the time of Louis XVI, even earlier, since the time of Magna Carta, limitation of absolute power has marked European politics and European political changes. We have currently in Albania all powers concentrated in one hand. And the role of the opposition in parliament was marginalized to the point where whether we were or not members of parliament didn't make a difference. In other words, ironical as it may sound, our exiting the parliament after all the small space that the opposition has under the constitution was squeezed out has brought no material difference in the way the parliament works or it doesn't work. Our status is this. We are demanding that a true parliament be elected by the Albanian people, and not one that has been produced not by the will of the people, but has been recently exposed by the most terrible collusion between organized crime and the party in power. So this is, ironically, not a push to destroy parliamentary life, but a push to resuscitate and to bring back parliament as a, first of all, a product of the free vote of people, and secondly, as a tool of accountability to the executive. Without that, we don't have the elementary Copenhagen criteria for fulfillment, without which it is unthinkable for the country to make way forward into European Union membership. So we are led by, our main motive is to help speed up Albania's path to the EU. In the current situation, or in the situation even before we exit parliament, no constitutional court, no Supreme Court, state capture, corruption at all levels of government, to quote State Department reporting our colleagues on longer. Us accepting the role of opposition in parliament as part of a democratic facade, as a facade, as a beard, would not only have led to further prolongation of the crisis and further worsening of the democratic situation, of the situation of democracy and rule of law, but would have also led to parapolitical actions. So, ironically, this is a chance for a last chance for a political solution. The situation is very grave. Organized crime has captured not simply the police or the judiciary, as would be the case episodically also in other countries in the region. It has captured the very instrument of democracy, elections. This must end, and the impunity of politicians who have become part of this must end. Without this two ending, there is no chance that Albania will get green light to become a member of the EU.
Do you believe that you will win at the future early election?
I certainly do, and so seem to believe most of Albanians, according to various polls. But what is most important is not who is going to win the elections. What is most important is that the next elections comply with European standards of free and fair elections. What is most important is that the next parliament is elected by the people of Albania and is not a product of dirty money and collusion between organized crime and politicians.
Do you think that Albania should correct its existing foreign policy.
Minister, and I've taken pride in Albania has been consistent in its foreign policy goals. It has always embraced European and Euro-Atlantic integration of all the countries in the region as the utmost important goal of foreign policy. It has always been a voice of moderation. It has supported strongly the objectives of NATO in its southern flank, where it also participates, and of the EU, and it has never served to create real or perceptual schismas with the overall Euro-Atlantic and European foreign policy for the region and wider. Whatever departures there may be, or erratic expressions that may create the impression of departures from these goals, are not the product of some deviation, institutional or political, but unfortunately, as I said before, are the product of the inevitable product of autocratic behavior that manifests itself also with well, delusions of grandeur, mythomania, and fake nationalism. I believe that our foreign policy has been strongly anchored on Euro-Atlantic and European principles, and it will continue to be so under the leadership of the Democratic Party in the future.
Albania is a member of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. What does this mean for Albanians?
What it means in practice is that we are trying to capitalize our uniquely positioned practice of tolerance, respect, and cooperation between different faiths as a bridging practice in a time of, let's say, aggressive manifestation of identity, either religious, ethnic, or otherwise. So we hope to bring this added value not only to the organization of the Islamic Conference, but also to the European Union and to other fora of international cooperation to show that respect for each other's faith and religious point of view is a virtue that pays off, and it pays off much, much better than the contrary, which is punishing currently societies and marginalizing communities throughout the world.
With which political parties do you cooperate in the region? Which are your sister parties, by countries?
My party is now, for quite some time, a member of the European People's Party. We fully adhere to the values of the European People's Party. You introduced me as the leader of the Conservative Democratic Party, and I know that's what we call. Of course, in the spectrum of European parties, there's another alliance of conservatives and reformists, ACRE, that an ally of ours is a member of. We are a member of the European People's Party and cooperate strongly with our sister parties throughout the region and throughout Europe. That, of course, does not mean that we are exclusive in our cooperation. On matters quintessential to European identity, such as respect for rule of law, functioning democracy, free market economy, with a strong social component that nobody gets left behind, we have been able to create good bridges of cooperation, even with parties outside of our political family. And definitely on matters of foreign policy and security, we join hands with all the like-minded parties in the EU and itself. For instance, our cooperation in the United States, although traditionally lies with the Republican Party, has also been excellent with the Democratic Party. We cooperate and receive assistance, and are very grateful for it from both the IRI and the NDI. And in the United Kingdom, which is heading for the Brexit, and our sister party is the Conservative Party.
Your cooperation with the Serbian Progressive Party
Well, the Serbian Progressive Party has recently become a member of the European People's Party, and that has provided an opportunity to meet and discuss in the framework of the political assembly of the EPP and the summits of the European People's Party. As a member of the EPP for just as long as the Democratic Party, and likewise,
not supported democratic change in Macedonian press agreement.
We have made our point very clear to our friends of Raporti. We believe, and in fact, this goes back to 10 years ago. Even now, share an anecdote, or an anecdote is true. 10 years ago, when we were very saddened to see that the name dispute was not resolved, and it led to the veto of Greece to block our friends from Skopje from becoming members. And we had this very frustrating lunch in Zagreb, which was supposed to be a festive lunch for the three becoming the 3A, the three Adriatic Charter members becoming members of NATO. But of course, two became, and the third did not become. It was actually the receiving of invitations to lunch. And at the point of frustration, I remember then Prime Minister Kreu asking the question, well, if you were put in front of a choice, what would you choose? Kosovo independence first or NATO membership first? Since you are calling for us to do NATO membership first, and then what would you do? And the response, of course, was, if you had to choose between the two, what would you choose? And our response was clear: choose NATO and then move forward to your next goal. However, that is now past history, and as I said, we support the press agreement. But of course, we are mindful that rule of law and respect for the Constitution remains a challenge for all countries in the Balkans, including the Republic of Macedonia. And what we want to see there is full respect for opposition rights, which we are very sensitive to being in opposition ourselves, and not simply lip service to those rights.
Now, your questions, if you have, you can also in Slovenian language.
Mr. Tahir
Maličaj, predsednik Zveze kulturnih društva Albanskih kulturnih organi, predsednik Zveze Sploha Albanskih društv v Sloveniji. Jaz, bodočega gospod domačin, slovenščine vlade vprašanje bom zastavil v albanščini, pa boste vi že preverili. Se poi quando mi stavo и quando прицеле, че kanë në mundësi të tillë, unë dy pyetje kam për juve, të cilat nuk I takojnë juve se nuk jeni në qeveri, por si e shihni pozicionin si opozitar. Pyetja ku ka ndjer Shqipëria, që ende është ndjesën ka Bashkimi Evropian, që shumë shtetet e rajonit ndrapajnë kyçën I kanë hapur shumë kapituj, e Shqipëria ende është ndjesur. Dhe pyetja e dytë është edhe më tutje nga pozicioni ju si shihni opozitës, në pekur është marrë mbledhjet e qeverisë Kosovë-Shqipëri, një ndër temat e tyre ishte që do të eliminohet kufiri Kosovë-Shqipëri apo roamingu. A ka qenë kjo temë për shkak politikës së brendshme, konsumit politikë të brendshme, apo kanë të Bashkimit Evropian të ndodhi çfarë I pandemës?
Respond in English.
Moni në gjuhën angleze.
Well, you know, the first concern that you raise is also the top priority for the Democratic Party. Yes, it is what has led us to take the most radical political action that a political party has taken ever, relinquishing parliamentary mandates, to ring the alarm bells for the state of democracy, the state of rule of law, and the state of fight against crime and corruption, the state of state capture. This because so far the subsequent consecutive backsliding in democratic standards has not been addressed, not by authorities in Albania, and has not received sufficient attention by institutions that have helped us so far, in particular, as I said, the European Commission. And it has left us without any other choice but to take this extreme act in order to to facilitate a restart, but not a restart for the sake of my political party or a restart for the sake of the opposition. A restart which should be based on European norms, standards, practices, and principles. As a sine qua non in 2019, we could have been forgiven transgressions in the first years as our path towards Europe and NATO started. We could have been forgiven transgressions as we were learning. We were in a learning curve. But 29 years after this transition has started, it must end. A day must come where we declare the end of transition and give no more indulgences for violation of democratic practices, such as elections, for violations of fundamental practices of rule of law, such as constitutionality of acts of government and parliament, respect for fundamental human rights and freedoms. So this act in itself brings, of course, a risk, because it does expose the full depth of crisis in a rather abrupt way, but it also brings a huge opportunity to make Albania once again, like 10 years ago, when we were leading the process of Euro-Atlantic and European integration, as I had the pleasure to share with Professor Petric earlier today, because we were achieving the required standards, because reforms were working, also because the carrot and stick approach was working. Now it is time for us to lead again. Why not to show the way forward also for other countries that are suffering under similar problems of autocratic behavior, of consolidation of all powers in one hand, of pressure towards the judiciary, of destroying the independence of the judiciary, of politically capturing the judiciary, of the desperate situation of media freedom and independence of media in all of the Western Balkans. To use this crisis as an opportunity for a transformative overhaul, where we say that enough is enough. Nothing better than the European standard can or will suffice. Now that the generation of 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds have no physical memory of communism or the effects of communism on society, it is our duty to take this positive energy of youth, to take the best lessons from the past, bitter as they may have been, to never again tolerate elections that are skewed by organized crime or corruption, to tolerate the accumulation of all powers in one hand, to tolerate violations of constitution and laws without consequences, to never again accept impunity for the powerful, in particular for politicians and organized crime bosses. So yes, our problem has been that we have not only stagnated but fallen back compared to countries that started later than we did, because of not only tolerating but accepting collusion between politics and organized crime. That turned Albania into a major hub of drug trafficking, money laundering, that now is playing a lethal role by capturing politics and capturing the economy, destroying the economy, thus destroying hope, destroying opportunity. Why do people leave? Why have half a million Albanians left? Because of no opportunities and because of no hope. The only way to return hope is to return opportunities. The only way to return opportunities is the European way, is the way of European values, ensuring that there is real, no fake rule of law, real and no fake elections, a real and not a fake parliament that holds the government accountable for true and not in a fake way, real and no fake media freedom, independent media freedom. This is the fight we're in. It's much more than just seeking the next election to be elected. My party was not born as a usual party that is born out of certain programs, certain ideas, to serve certain ideas, and to then calculate to become the government or to become part of the government. The Democratic Party of Albania was born as a missionary party. It was born out of youth movement to topple the most savage dictatorship of Europe. I take pride in noticing that that missionary call remains in the DNA of the Democratic Party. And now, again, we are in a missionary battle, not simply to fight for political rotation, not simply to come to power, but to fight for European standards, to end 3 decades of transition, and to accept nothing less than European standards in democracy, rule of law, and free market economy. On the issue of 2 governments meeting, of course, we support governments meeting, it's good. Why not? We've always maintained that governments must not meet for a picture. They are picture-perfect meetings. You know, beautiful, when you look at the picture, beautiful meetings, you know, twice as many ministers around the table, it means bigger table, beautifully decorated with flowers and flags, national flag, which is also the flag of the Republic of Albania, the flag of Kosovo, European flag, beautiful speeches. Love to hear that. Zero problem. Albania and Kosovo do not even respect World Trade Organization standards when it comes to potato exports and imports. And this, of course, is a process with the aspiration of the people to come together, to join hands, to produce through synergy of our markets better and more qualitative economic activities, better life, higher quality of life for Albanians in Albania, for Albanians and other citizens in Kosovo. So in this regard, I welcome very much when I heard about the eliminating of the roaming, which should have happened a long time ago. And of course, also for easing border procedures, which I was proud to put a founding stone as Interior Minister. I eliminated double controls. And was well on my way with my late colleague to see Bayram Recep, to see if we could move towards an even easier procedure. So we full-heartedly support this. This has got nothing to do with the nationalist rhetoric of unification. This is about reducing the significance of borders, making borders insignificant. And yes, why not between Albania and Kosovo, between Albania and North Macedonia, between Albania and Montenegro, and Serbia as well. Of course, in that regard, it is important that the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina starts to produce results and is not held hostage by Milosevic concepts.
The next question? Just a minute. Yeah.
I'm Dr. Alinka Verbule, and I have this question which is based on an article of Mr. Z.Basha. He says that the Western allies have actually said that the voting parliament is undemocratic move, and secondly, also that some of the candidates or people on your candidate list have actually taken oath and went to the parliament. So that goes the same for the LSI party. So I would like to get your feedback on this. What is happening? Why this is happening? Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping to escape the detailed descriptions of the very sometimes nasty panorama of internal politics in Albania, but let me be very brief, and if you have a follow-up question, I'll be happy to answer. We are the only country in the world without a constitutional court and without a functioning Supreme Court. All powers are vested in the hands of the Prime Minister, and so far, parliamentary majority not only has failed to protect the Constitution, which could be one check, but has gladly partaken in several voting sessions, voting decisions, and laws that are blatantly anti-constitutional, even violating Albania's commitment under the European Convention of Human Rights. Meanwhile, the rights of the opposition, the right to have investigative committees, the right to call ministers to public sessions of transparent questions and answers, whether in committees or in general sessions, summoning official documents, and even the right of speech have one by one been frustrated. What I mean frustrated have been eliminated with no consequences. Usually they involve consequences. Certainly not complying with the rules of the investigative committees and not complying with the rules of disclosure implies criminal consequences for those institutions and their representatives of civil institutions that do not do so. So what we have in a few words is this. We have a situation of all powers in the hand of the Prime Minister, the only check being the Constitutional Court not existing. We have the parliamentary opposition completely sidelined. So whether in Parliament or out of Parliament, as I said earlier, has brought no material consequences in the way the Parliament functions, or rather doesn't function. What has brought devastating consequences is the lack of constitutional court, lack of Supreme Court. Meanwhile, in early this year, Voice of America and other media outlets published intercepts of prosecutorial investigations that show how organized crime bosses and leading figures of the Socialist Party colluded in 2017 elections to steal the elections. And this, of course, has increased public pressure, in particular towards the opposition, to take measures in what appears to be now not simply an autocratic government acting outside of the Constitution and outside of the laws, basically a tyranny, but also what appears to be an illegitimate government. Now, the action we have taken, of course, is very strong action, and we expected, neither did we expect nor do we expect congratulations for this. But what we are expecting is a higher degree of awareness, and we see this finally coming, finally waking up to look at the problems that led to these unprecedented actions. Way out, a political way out, in order to avoid a parapolitical or violent way out, which is sometimes the way these crises have been handled in the past. The way out is a transitory government that will untie the hands of the judiciary and allow full prosecution of the people who have been caught, the politicians who have been caught colluding with organized crime, in order to set an example that no impunity will ever be tolerated when it comes to destroying the foundation of democracy, which is the free vote. We will be not only willing, but eager to cooperate with this transitory government to undertake all steps to put forward a judicial reform free from political capture, to take steps to completely reform our election system, and other steps that may lead to what now seems very hard, in fact it seems impossible, the opening of negotiations in June. That is an utmost objective of the Democratic Party. It remains an utmost aspiration of the European people. So we believe that instead of sleepwalking towards certain death of democracy, we have decided to wake up and shake up the system and provide the way forward, which is the way of European standards and European principles. I hope this answers your question. If you don't have a follow-up.
Please.
I have a question. My name is and I want to know how you see Albania 2030.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ademi. Let me see how I would like to see Albania 2025. I would like to see an Albania with no contested elections anymore, with where biometric identification of citizens, which is already effective since 2010, has led to an uncontestable, hacker-free process of electronic voting and electronic counting that makes it possible not only for parliamentary and local elections to be undertaken in an uncontestable climate, but also for the tools of local and national referenda to be used to decide on important issues of future, but also of sustainable development. An Albania of opportunities with no hidden barriers or open barriers for participants in the market, in particular for the youth. An Albania eager to embrace the next revolution in technology that is coming, with its young population eager to learn, but that is able through dual vocational training and other best practices to do so at home instead of mass migration to Germany and other Western European countries or United States. You know, in 1990, when Albania opened up, 2% of our population was in possession of telephones. The lowest penetration in all of Europe, in fact, lower than Maghreb. But in 1996, we had more fiber optics than some Western European countries. It's called quantum leap. So we could take advantage of this quantum leap in technology and the young, eager population of Albania to make another qualitative jump forward as far as Albania's economy is concerned, building on some top priorities, but clear priorities. Higher education through pure vocational training, and in particular information technology. Tourism, still huge potential unexploited for a beautiful country, supported by well-sustained agricultural and agribusinesses. Logistics, we are a distribution box in the heart of the Western Balkans, and they of course need robust investments in infrastructure. And energy, where we still have a lot of potential to harvest, especially in clean hydro energy, not only to support our growing economy, but also to support exporting energy in the rest of the region and wider into European markets. But in particular, what I want to see in 2025 is all political decision-making ultimately resting in the hands of the sovereign, which in the Republic of Albania is the people of Albania, and not in the hands full of politicians, especially not politicians connected to organized crime and government crimes. And then economic decisions in the hand of competition, not in the hand of these government cronies, these oligarchs. Breaking these circles of political decision-making, breaking these closed circles of economic decision-making, opening the country up, a competitive economy, competitive politics. This is where I would like to see Albania in 2025. And I know we will get there once we ensure the foundations of European democratic coexistence and free market economies. Rule of law, functioning democratic institutions, starting with functioning parliament capable of holding the government accountable, and a judiciary that does not protect but punishes in equal measure everybody who breaks the law and ends impunity of politicians and other actors. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No? No. Then I will go back to Ziad to close up.
I would like to thank Mr. Lulzim Basha for his interesting lecture, which will help us to understand better the current situation in Albania and also the future of this country and the region as a whole. At the end, I would like to invite you to join us at our future events. Thank you.
Thank you very much.